Director Jennifer Hamady, thank you so much for being here. The NTSB is the nation's safety watchdog, ensuring that safety is the top priority for the transportation industry and the U.S. Department of Transportation. Through its impartial investigations into transportation accidents, the board makes recommendations that have transformed transportation safety. NTSB's recommendations prompted action to require railroads to use positive train control, passengers to use seat belts, and commercial airlines to have well-rested crews. However, the needs to continue to improve safety are ongoing. For instance, runaway near misses and close calls in aviation sector are far too frequent, and we simply must do better. East Palestine derailment and the inspections that have been less than lacking on the requirements to make sure that we really are looking out for these longer trains and improvements. And that is just frustrating given last Saturday's Norfolk Southern derailment in Pennsylvania where 3 trains collided. And we're seeing a crisis in our nation's roadways in 2021. The latest data we have, fatalities are the highest since 2005. In my home state, fatalities have increased 40% since the pandemic and 70% in the last decade. So while all of that is enough to think about, we are urgently in need of an NTSB that is operating at full strength and investigators that will use that expertise to help us plan for improved safety. That is why this committee has passed out our aviation bill with the reauthorization of the NTSB. And I want to thank you for your hard work in eliminating backlogs that we have seen at the NTSB, but clearly you need more investigators on the job to help. The FAA Senate bill advanced by this committee also requires that the FAA finalize their 25-hour cockpit recording rule, also flight data recorders, and improve with aviation safety inspectors from the FAA. I think these are important reforms that will be critical to the NTSB, and that's why we are working hard with our House colleagues to finalize the House bill and send it to the President's desk. But obviously, the safety concerns of the flying public is probably the main focus of this morning's hearing. Serious questions remain unanswered about the door plug accident on Alaska Flight 1282, and we need to be satisfied that manufacturers have strong quality controls and the FAA oversight is robust. The FAA and manufacturers, in my opinion, should listen to machinists and professional engineers who are asking for a stronger safety culture to improve certification and production quality, and we need to do everything to make sure they are not intimidated on the job to just keep the line moving. Members have been briefed about the accident, and this committee will continue to do its oversight role. On February 6, 2024, the NTSB released its preliminary report regarding the flight 1282. I appreciate its prompt investigation of the accident and its preliminary findings. The committee continues, though, to be concerned about the deficiencies in safety culture, I think probably also articulated or illuminated by the individual report that was required by our ANCSA bill and was delivered just a few weeks ago. The report implies that the Boeing facilities may have significant, now I'm saying your report to be clear, implies that Boeing facilities may have significant deficiencies in record keeping. The investigation continues to determine what manufacturer documentations were used to authorize the opening and closing of the left mid-exit door plug during rivet rework. In particular, we want to know about the disclosure of records that may show why or how it was improperly installed and what caused the accident of 1282, which raises questions that we'll ask in the Q&A period of whether the documents even exist. These are important issues that we need to get to the bottom of. There are lots of people in the Northwest, not just those who work at Boeing, but those who are involved in an aviation culture around our state. We want to get this right. So I'll look forward to asking questions about this. We also, in my opinion, need to continue the final report on the East Palestine that was helped informed by Senators Brown and Vance in the Railway Safety Act. We need to include speeding up the phase-out of legacy tank cars and that carry flammable liquids, require railroads to provide states with information about hazardous materials, and we need to pass the Senate bill that highlights many of these things. So I look forward to hearing more about the status of these investigations and what else we can do to make sure that the NTSB is fully operational and capable of doing this investigative job. Thank you, and now I'll turn to the ranking member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're here today to have a comprehensive discussion about the work of the National Transportation Safety Board, or the NTSB. I want to thank Chairwoman Jennifer Homendy for being here today and for her strong leadership at the NTSB. I certainly recognize, and I'm sure my colleagues here would agree, the magnitude of the task of investigating complex and tragic incidents thoroughly and impartially. And NTSB's arduous task is only made more difficult by the lack of a full board, a situation that I hope the Senate soon rectifies. Naturally, we all want answers from an investigation as soon as possible, but proper analysis takes time. I'm grateful for your work, Madam Chair, and for the work of all the members and staff at the NTSB. The NTSB serves the important function of identifying the causes of transportation incidents and making recommendations to prevent similar future ones. Both private and public sector transportation operators learn from NTSB's investigations and recommendations. The NTSB does not have regulatory authority over transportation safety. Whether the NTSB's recommendations are considered by Congress, placed in regulations, or voluntarily adopted by companies depends on the credibility of the board to conduct thorough investigations without prejudice to a conclusion. Maintaining that credibility is essential. I look forward to hearing from Chairwoman Homendy about the investigations before the NTSB. Americans are rightly concerned about the depressurization event on Alaska Airlines Flight 1282. Concerned about runway incursions, such as the one that occurred in Austin, Texas, and the derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, last year. I recognize that the Chairwoman may not and should not guess what the board's recommendations will be or discuss non-public information from these investigations. However, I hope to hear about the status of those investigations and any preliminary information that is appropriate to share at this time. Relatedly, I plan to ask the Chair about a recurring problem with congressional oversight of transportation incidents that are concurrently under investigation at the NTSB. In some cases, companies that are party to NTSB investigations have cited NTSB's confidentiality agreement and regulations as restricting what those companies can provide to members of Congress and when. That is, of course, incorrect. Administrative regulations and non-disclosure agreements do not trump Congress's constitutional power of inquiry, and I look forward to hearing the Chair's opinion on the matter as a former congressional staffer herself. This committee also needs to hear about the NTSB's authorizing statute, as well as the reauthorization proposal the NTSB submitted to Congress. Members of this committee must have the opportunity to comprehensively examine the NTSB as an agency and to contemplate any changes to the NTSB's authorizing statute. Let me be clear. The NTSB is a critical agency that does vital work. I support that work, and I'm happy to engage in a thorough discussion about its authorities in addition to the funding it needs. Without that discussion, I think the Senate would be failing to meet its responsibilities at a time when the importance of the NTSB could not be clearer. Fortunately, today's hearing is an opportunity to begin such a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. And now we'll hear from the chair. Thank you for being here. We look forward to your remarks.
Thank you, and good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today to discuss the NTSB, our needs, our challenges, and our critical safety mission. Throughout a typical year, the NTSB works on about 2,200 domestic and 450 foreign cases, and we expect the number of cases annually to remain high and continue to increase in complexity. Some investigations understandably get more public attention than others, but all our investigations are critical to improving safety. I understand that members of the committee have a particular interest in our highest profile investigations, including the in-flight structural failure of a Boeing 737-9 and the Norfolk Southern train derailment in East Palestine. These investigations are critically important, and I'm happy to answer as many questions as I can. But I do want to emphasize that these investigations are ongoing. There's still a lot of work to do to understand what led to these events, so I want to be careful not to undermine the work of our meticulous investigators. Unlike the Alaska 1282 investigation, 2 dockets are open to the public on East Palestine. They contain over 6,400 pages of factual information, which I can discuss at length. With that said, these are just 2 of 1,200 active, open NTSB investigations in 47 states and Puerto Rico, in addition to the 140 open foreign investigations in over 50 countries. We owe it to the families of those involved, to the communities where events occurred, and to the traveling public to find out what happened in all these tragedies to prevent them from reoccurring. That's as true for Alaska 1282 as it is for the recent natural gas-fueled home explosions and fires in Mississippi that killed a woman in her home, or for the multi-vehicle crash in Ohio on November 14th of last year, which included a motor coach carrying high school band members and killed 6 people, or for the hot air balloon accident in Arizona on January 14th that killed 4. Over the last year, the NTSB has completed many significant and complex investigations and issued safety recommendations to prevent these kinds of tragedies. There are currently over 1,000 open safety recommendations that we've made across every mode of transportation. In 2022 and 2023, we issued 159 new recommendations and closed 261. Of those closed, 80% were closed acceptable, meaning that the recipient took action to implement the safety recommendation. This success rate demonstrates the value of our recommendations, and we appreciate the efforts of recipients to address them. The NTSB is also pleased that this committee has included provisions in FAA reauthorization to address a number of our recommendations. That work will save lives, and we thank you for it. We also appreciate the committee's efforts to reauthorize the NTSB as part of the FAA bill. Our authorization expired at the end of fiscal year 22. And we are incredibly grateful for the $140 million that was just provided to us in the FY24 appropriations that is before the House and Senate under consideration. We are a small agency relative to our federal partners, both in terms of the size of our budget and our workforce. But as the numbers show, our impact is profound and disproportionate. I like to say we're a small agency with a big voice, and everyone at the NTSB plays a critical role in achieving our mission to make transportation safer. To continue as the world's preeminent safety agency, the gold standard, and develop recommendations that advance safety change without delay, we need more resources. Flat funding in the out years, as proposed in the Senate bill, would frankly devastate our agency. In fact, it's unprecedented, and reverse the progress made on enhancing and preparing our workforce for emerging challenges and improving the timeliness of our investigations. As you work through conference, I strongly urge your continued support for the NTSB's ability to carry out our critical safety mission now and in the future. Before I close, I mentioned loss earlier. Loss is not new to the NTSB. We know all too well how fragile and precious life is. But when it hits home, it hits us hard and reminds us once again what's truly important, our relationships with each other. The NTSB is in mourning this week from the sudden death of our Director of Marine Safety, Captain Morgan Terrell. Morgan began his career at NTSB in 2003 as a nautical operations investigator. He left in 2007 to serve as Vice President of Marine Investigations for Princess Cruises and returned to the NTSB in 2010. In 2014, Morgan became Chief of Investigations in our Office of Marine Safety. 3 years later, he was promoted to Deputy Director and then to Director in 2021. Morgan was a marine safety expert. He was a proud graduate of the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy and served as a licensed deck officer, including master, on a variety of commercial vessels, and he was an incredible advocate for improving safety on our waterways. His last words to me on February 11th were, "I am surrounded by my family." Morgan was very close to his family, and we're fortunate to have been part of Morgan's. He was an incredible person. He was so kind and thoughtful, a mentor, a teacher, and a friend to so many of us at the NTSB, the Coast Guard, the Navy, and the Merchant Marine Academy, and he'll be missed. As a mom, I cannot imagine a greater loss than the loss of your child. I spoke to Morgan's mom yesterday, and she said that there will be a piece of her missing forever. So I want to extend our deepest condolences to Morgan's mom, Catherine, Morgan's father, Brian, and his older brother, John. And I also want to extend my deepest condolences to all my colleagues at the NTSB for such a tragic loss. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Hamady, and thank you for remembering him this way at the hearing. I think you represent an organization that is all about the culture of those inspectors behind the scenes doing incredibly important work that we only know the results of. We don't get to see the faces. They don't come before us in this way. So thank you so much, and we are so sorry for the NTSB's loss and this individual. I'm going to let my colleague, Senator Fisher, ask the first question, and then I'll come back to me in a minute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Chair Hamady, for being here today. I appreciate it. Last year, the University of Nebraska at Lincoln campus conducted a first-of-its-kind crash test of an electric pickup truck to study whether current highway guardrails adequately protect against the growing number of those heavier EVs that are on our roads. At 60 miles per hour, the 7,000-pound electric truck tore through the barrier without offering any protection to the traveling public or reduction in speed. I've recently heard from first responders that are also concerned about responding to electric vehicle fires. 40% of firefighters have never had EV fire safety training, and I've heard of instances of more water needed to extinguish vehicle batteries and the increase in those toxic gases from the lithium batteries. What has NTSB found in its investigations on the EV crashes that are unique compared to the internal combustion engines? Have you begun to condense that data so it can educate us on what's happening here?
Yes, just a few years ago, we issued a report on the risks of lithium-ion battery fires in electric vehicles to first responders and to second responders, and we defined second responders in the report as tow truck operators. We had done a number of investigations where there was significant risk to the first responders in terms of stranded energy in the vehicle and in the battery and its components itself. The amount of work it took to extinguish the fires and the potential for shock to emergency responders themselves. In fact, we did an investigation in Mountain View, California, where the first responders had to reach out to the auto manufacturer to ask them to come to the scene of the crash. They were lucky they were 3 miles away. But if you think about volunteer firefighters who may be in a rural area. That's not something that's readily at their ability to get people on scene. In this particular one, we saw reignition several times of the electric vehicle, and we have with others, not just on the scene, but also on the tow truck, and up to 5 days later in the tow yard itself. So they are a significant risk in terms of battery fire. They're a significant risk for emergency responders, and while we have not done an investigation involving electric vehicles and the weight, I have raised a red flag numerous times to say it is an impact on safety. You mentioned the excellent work that was done by the University of Nebraska. Our guardrails, crash attenuators, they are rated up to 5,000 pounds. Many of these vehicles go up to 10,000 pounds. One vehicle, the lithium-ion battery alone weighs the same weight as a Honda Civic, 3,000 pounds. So that has an impact on safety, not just on infrastructure, making sure that people in the vehicles are safe after there is a crash, but vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to those outside of a vehicle, and as I said, vehicle to infrastructure. It's going to have a significant impact on safety.
I wanted to follow up with your comment when you just talk, about the weight of these vehicles. Currently, we have governmental regulations that stipulate the use of the male crash test dummies in vehicle testing, and it doesn't mandate any inclusion of female crash test dummies. And this is despite the data that's out there revealing a 17% higher mortality rate and a 73% higher likelihood of serious injury among women who are in these vehicle crashes compared to men. And given the statistics that are out there just on regular vehicles, not even on EVs, with the exponential increase in the weight there, don't you think that we need to look at female crash test dummies as well, so we can start to gather data there? And do you have any information on the different size vehicles that women may choose to drive compared to men?
Women typically pick larger size vehicles, sport utility vehicles, minivans, the larger vehicles. Whether it's an electric vehicle or a gas-fueled vehicle, we are seeing increasing sizes and weights of vehicles across the industry. Crash test dummies right now for adults are based on really back to the 70s, based on an adult male that is the height of about 5'9" and weighs 175 pounds. That is not applicable to most females. I don't know how many of us have gotten into a vehicle as a female. I'm 5'4", and that seatbelt comes across my neck. It wasn't until I have my most recent one where I can put up the seat that it comes down. But that has our stature, or the stature of different types of people, need to be taken into consideration. I'm really thankful for your work in this area, by the way, and very pleased with the GAO's report that came out as a result of that work. I do hope NHTSA takes them up on it and really takes those recommendations seriously to really look at the different types of people who are operating in our vehicles to ensure safety. And it's not just the safety of the individuals, it's also making sure that those vehicles are structured so they're protecting, it's the crashworthiness of the vehicle and protecting those inside it.
Thank you very much. And I hope when you gather the statistics on the threats that our first responders face with these vehicles, you make that available.
Yes, and we will make sure that your staff gets our report, and I'm happy to come in at any time and go through the issues.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As this committee has investigated transportation incidents from the derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, to the depressurization incident on Alaska Airlines Flight 1282, a common refrain from parties to NTSB investigations is that they need advance approval from the NTSB prior to providing documents and information to members of Congress. Madam Chair, is that true?
That is not true.
As you know, this committee has significant oversight authority and responsibility. Does the NTSB's confidentiality agreement with parties to NTSB investigations restrict access by members of Congress to documents and information in any way?
Absolutely not. And parties should not use the NTSB as a shield.
Thank you for clarifying. I agree, but that is important to have that on the record, so I appreciate it.
Absolutely. You have a right to that information and should get that information.
Thank you. Turning specifically to Alaska Airlines Flight 1282, I am deeply concerned about potential safety issues with the Boeing 737 MAX 9. It is essential that the NTSB's investigation get to the bottom of this and identify any safety issues and potential solutions. To that end, it is equally important that the parties to the investigation cooperate fully with the NTSB, with Congress, and others investigating the incident. Madam Chair, how cooperative have the parties to the investigation been with the NTSB, and have you gotten timely access to the documents, the information, and the witnesses you need?
There are a number of parties to the investigation. Some parties have been very cooperative. For example, the Federal Aviation Administration. Boeing has not provided us with the documents and information that we have requested numerous times over the past few months, specifically with respect to opening, closing, and removal of the door, and the team that does that work at the Renton facility.
Wow. Are you telling us that even 2 months later, you still do not know who actually opened the door plug?
That's correct, Senator. We don't know, and it's not for lack of trying. It's not unusual that we don't get information immediately in an investigation. I can point to numerous investigations where this occurs, and it takes months and months to get information. But for this one, it's 2 months later. We know for a fact that there is a team that deals with the doors in Renton. There's an entire team of 25 people and a manager. The manager has been out on medical leave. We've not been able to interview that individual. We've asked for the names of the other 25 people, have not received the names. We've asked for the records with respect to what occurred. We've asked for what shift it occurred on. We think we know what days the work occurred on, but that's only because of our investigators' work looking at pictures and emails to try to get to the bottom of that information. We don't have the records. We don't have the names of the 25 people that is in charge of doing that work in that facility. It's absurd that 2 months later, we don't have that. Our investigators right now are at the Renton facility, and they are conducting interviews. Those started on Sunday, and they will continue for the rest of the week. One example, while we were out there, we investigated both the Spirit Aerospace employees that did the work on the rivets. Well, we don't know who did the work on the door plug. For the Spirit Aerospace employees, we were just informed last week, they're actually not Spirit Aerospace employees, they're contractors. They work for 3 different contracting firms, Aerotech, Strom Aviation, and Launch, all 3 in the state of Washington. All 3 people work for 3 different entities for Spirit Aerospace. Those were not told to us by Spirit Aerospace. That information was told to us through the individuals who were being interviewed that contacted us directly. So we have engaged our attorney on this matter, just so you're aware.
Well, I will say that is utterly unacceptable, and the parties who are being investigated by NTSB need to cooperate fully, and Congress expects them to cooperate fully because you have an obligation to the American public to get to the bottom of what happened. Today is March 6th. I'm going to ask you to inform this committee in writing 1 week from today whether or not Boeing has cooperated. And I expect you to have that list of 25 names. And so I'm going to ask you a week from today to inform this committee in writing whether they provided those 25 names or not, because this investigation needs to get to the bottom of what occurred and what caused that accident.
Thank you. I will provide that to the committee in writing. The 25 names, it's not just the 25 names. We'd also like to get, and we've repeatedly requested from Boeing, the documentation that went along with the work of opening the door plug, closing the door plug, or any sort of removal, if that exists.
So please include that information as well when you respond in writing a week from today to let us know the level of cooperation you're seeing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Following on, the expert review panel found that Boeing employees are still afraid to speak up and report safety issues. There is a way for employees to speak directly to the FAA. Is there a way for people to speak directly to NTSB to aid in this investigation?
Yes, in fact, I received a whistleblower report myself. Anonymously, we received some information that I made sure our team has. It also went to our team, so we do have a couple of ways. The best way is for people to reach out to us at the website of witness@ntsb.gov. Witness@ntsb.gov, and we'll make sure to follow up on that information.
Were you able to get from the company what specific procedures that they have for identifying, storing, protecting, retrieving, and retaining quality records? Were they forthcoming on that?
We have not received that information.
Does the fact that Boeing has not produced these documents or that NTSB investigators have not been able to retrieve them indicate that they do not exist or ever existed?
They may not. There are two options. Either they exist and we don't have them, or they do not exist, which raises two very different questions, several different questions, depending on which one is the right answer.
Would, if you don't have that documentation, what does it say about the quality assurance program?
We know we have been told, let me back up on that. We have been informed that they have a procedure to maintain documents on when work is performed, and including when door plugs are open, closed, or removed. We have not been able to verify that. And without that information, that raises concerns about quality assurance, quality management, safety management systems within Boeing.
So that's why I asked that first question about procedures for identifying, storing, and protecting. Everybody knows out at Boeing that the workers think that the plane will fly when the paperwork weighs more than the plane. That is their way of saying a lot of paperwork exists. People know that you don't move the line without paperwork. That's just part of the process. So the question is, are you looking at those procedures, and you're saying they're not forthcoming even on the procedures?
That's correct, but we are looking at those procedures. We go very in-depth and very broad. We'll look at the procedures, policies. We will also look at other work that was done around the same time or within the last several years to see if there are concerns with other work or records that may be missing. So we go in depth, and we are also going in depth on safety culture, safety promotion, safety management as a whole.
Okay, and so do you, and is the FAA in their aviation safety investigators helpful in this or not helpful?
FAA has been very cooperative and very helpful to us in the investigation, and we appreciate them. They've been a partner throughout this from the very beginning.
So I'm saying, do any of their aviation inspectors on site have data or information about what processes and procedures may have existed or didn't exist?
That is something that I would like to follow up with our team and get back to you on.
Okay. And then back to this point, every shift is documented. You know the workers that were involved in this particular area. You can get their names. You can ask for interviews with those individuals. And you're saying that that hasn't happened?
Correct. We have gone through emails, we've gone through texts, we've looked at pictures to begin to get a picture of the date in mid-September, or the 2 dates in mid-September that we believe the work occurred. We haven't received that information directly from Boeing. We also believe we know what shift it occurred on, but there is one team that deals with the doors of 25 people. Why we don't have those names today, 2 months later, is really disappointing.
Well, it's beyond disappointing. We have an entire economy that depends on people getting this right. And I thought that the CEO said that they would cooperate to the fullest. So it seems like this information is now stymieing your investigation. And it seems that it's knowable and that you should at least be able to talk to the individuals there. Do you have any concerns? There was a report about there could be an additional, because there was a consent decree that was about to expire, that any kind of other investigation by Department of Justice would impact your investigation?
I do have concerns. Our attorneys also have concerns, only from the aspect, we don't want to tell any other agency what they should or should not do. Where it becomes a concern for us, we'll get the information at some point. Where it becomes a concern for us is when employees and others don't feel safe to speak to us. And so they begin...
That is occurring now. And so what do we need to do to make sure that people feel safe and secure? That's part of the expert report. It's part of why we passed ANCSA, to make sure there was no retaliation. What else can we do? And we can't have a viewpoint that I just had to keep the line moving. That's not the viewpoint we want. We want employees who are saying, I have a concern about this, to be listened to and to be backed up by those FAA ASIs. That's what we want. And so in this case, we want to understand whether that kind of retaliation still exists and what we can do to make sure that these people feel free to speak to you and to others who are investigating.
I completely agree with that. The aviation industry is so safe because we do encourage, the industry has encouraged anonymous reporting, and through anonymous reporting address risk proactively, and encouraged employees to speak up. That's how we have addressed safety and gotten to our excellent gold standard safety record we are in today in the aviation industry. Without that, there is a significant concern. I am aware of the concerns with Boeing, which is why we are delving into safety culture and safety management.
And have you discussed this? Because I know that the FAA administrator just had a 5-hour meeting with them last week. Do you think this was part of the discussion?
With FAA?
Yes.
I imagine so.
Okay. Senator Moran and then Senator Rosen.
Thank
Senator
you,
Blackburn.
Madam Chairman. I appreciate that, and I say thank you to my colleague. I want to thank you for coming to Tennessee recently. I want to thank you for your hands-on approach as you are dealing with these issues of train crashes, and I know it's been more hands-on than President Biden, and I appreciate that. I also want to say thank you for the outreach this week as we had a plane crash in Nashville, and for your forthcoming information that has helped us with that, the press conference that you have held. I'd like to ask you if there is any additional information that you can supply today on that plane crash.
The only additional information is that we moved the wreckage to a secure location in Tennessee, and we are beginning to look at the wreckage. Our deepest condolences to the family, 2 adults and 3 children. It was very tragic. But as we receive more information, I will make sure that you continue to remain informed on this.
I appreciate that, and indeed we do extend those condolences, and what a tragic situation. But as we discussed yesterday, gratitude that no lives were lost there on I-40 when that plane crashed. I do want to add to the comments of the ranking member and chairman about our concern over lack of cooperation and what we perceive is lack of cooperation on these investigations. And I know that's a source of frustration for you and your team. It is for us, because we hear that some of the manufacturers are not as cooperative as they should be. The maintenance organizations are not as cooperative. And Madam Chairman, I would add that it is not only the planes, it is also trains. It is also other entities that are involved in the flying public. I do have one other question I wanted to ask you about. I have advocated for the Let Experienced Pilots Fly. When we look at the number, what is happening in aviation and the need to get these planes in the air on time, on schedule for the flying public, and I recently offered that as an amendment. It failed. I know the unions are against this. I know the union bosses had reached out to the FAA to block this, raising the pilot age from 65 to 67 and keeping these experienced pilots flying. Yesterday, my flight coming in, we had turbulence. I was glad that there was a guy with experience in the cockpit. And I would just like to know if the Airline Pilot Association has reached out to the NTSB to stand against that. I know you can't take a position on the issue, but I want to know if the union has reached out to the NTSB requesting a position.
No, Senator, the union has not reached out to the NTSB requesting a position. They know that the NTSB bases its recommendations on the facts around a particular investigation, and we don't have a recommendation in this particular area.
Okay, and of course, I think for the administration, for the union to reach out to the administration and the administration to have a position like the FAA had on this is completely inappropriate. Thank you so much, and I yield back my time. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Klobuchar. I thought Senator Rosen would be next, but Senator Klobuchar had signed in, so sorry that she's here. And then we'll go back to Senator Moran.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Hamidi, and thank you for your work. I wanted to start out with just railway safety, something you know is big in every state. The NTSB determined that the cause of that derailment in Raymond, Minnesota, appreciate your interest in that, was a broken rail along a section of a track near the town. Can you talk about investment in tracks and how important it is and the importance of the Railway Safety Act?
Yeah, investment in rail and our rail infrastructure is an investment in safety. So certainly, I would strongly support investment in rail. On the Railway Safety Act, we're appreciative to the committee for including a number of our current recommendations on rail, including expanding the definition of high-hazard flammable trains, providing more information to local communities, to responders, making sure they have the gear and the training that they need to conduct their important safety mission, and certainly addressing DOT 111s. We would ask that DOT 111s, the provision be expanded even further to eliminate them from all hazmat service. One thing in particular out of the Raymond, Minnesota investigation I'll just mention is we found out with the DOT 117 tank cars, we saw that the gaskets around those particular tank cars, especially the bottom outlet valve and some others, melted. And so the lading came out, the material came out. So that's something we've recommended to be addressed in a couple of our investigations. Happy to provide more information to you on that.
Yeah, and as you know, the rail, they were there on the scene, immediate cleanup. We were fortunate not to have what happened in Ohio, and the town handled it, as did your agency well.
Yeah, they did a great job. BNSF did a great job on that as well, and it was great working with them, and I was pleased to be on the scene as well.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I remember that. It was a cold day.
It was cold. Great
Okay.
community, though. They all came together and brought us Lots
Yeah.
of warmth and cocoa and you name it.
Exactly. I think I'll ask on the record the NTSB's open recommendations on rail crossings, just that's something also I wanted to mention, and move to another part, air traffic control hiring. I've talked to Mr. Whitaker about this. We have a very active airport, a great airport, voted best in North America 2 of the last 3 years. And could you talk about focusing on training and hiring more controllers? He told me there's going to be a look at using military people, hiring them more often, and just the importance of that for safety.
Yeah, hiring is key. The FAA has set goals for hiring. What we're not talking about is the people who leave every year, which is about half. So it's a constant catch-up. Investment in the FAA also, besides the NTSB, robust, sustained investment, long-term, is key for FAA's success and for air traffic control and making sure people are hired and trained. With respect to training, we have been advocating for meaningful, value-added training and training to personnel to proficiency. The one concern I would raise with respect to the aviation industry and really across the transportation industry is we've gone to this death by PowerPoint in training, whether it is iPads or computer-based training. There are great simulators. One I just went to at DCA with respect to air traffic control. That is a great training tool, hands-on for air traffic controllers, which they deserve. We have found that this move towards iPad, PowerPoint training, that employees aren't really digesting that well, even training a week ago. So it's not just providing meaningful value-added training, but really looking at how people learn. Not everybody can learn well from an iPad or a PowerPoint. So making sure that they get the training that they need that's appropriate for their positions.
Okay, very good. Next Generation 911. I'm the co-chair of that bipartisan caucus. The NTSB has issued recommendations related to 911 systems in several investigations in recent years. Can you talk about the importance of improving that 911 infrastructure? We all know people aren't just calling in on landlines anymore. They're calling in on cell phones. They want to send pictures, and there have been some improvements across the country, but there could be many more.
Yeah, they are the first responders on scene. We are the investigators. So making sure that they have robust communication systems, they have the infrastructure they need, people are able to get someone on the other line, and that 911 as a whole, we have a number of recommendations on 911 operators and then also local emergency responders on coordination during an investigation and ensuring there's appropriate coordination. Happy to provide you more information on all our recommendations for that.
Okay, very good. And just one last thing on air traffic control, as our chairwoman has returned, is that Senator Braun and I have a bill to boost FAA training capacity, increase the FAA's use of its expedited hiring authority, and hope you'll look at that. I think it could be helpful. And I see Senator Moran is here as well, Madam Chairman, who's co-chair of the Tourism Caucus and has done a lot on air. So thanks.
Thank you.
Senator Moran.
Chairwoman, thank you. Chair Homendy, thank you for your presence again today. Thank you for your continued efforts to keep us informed and hopefully helpful in the cause. NTSB released on February 6th its preliminary findings. You hosted several of us at NTSB where we got to see, in a sense, kind of the hands-on circumstances and to hear from your investigators. So I think I had a good feel for what I thought transpired at that point in time. And your testimony today about lack of cooperation doesn't suggest, it tells me that there is more to be known than what that preliminary examination determined. So what is it that keeps you from being able to issue your final report? And maybe you've already said that this morning, but I want to hear it in a concise, what's missing kind of answer.
Yes, thank you. So our preliminary reports that we issue within 10 days to 4 weeks after an initial event, provides factual information that we have so far. But it really is just the beginning of the investigation. When we conduct investigations such as this, a major, we certainly focus on timeliness of investigation, but it does take time because we are looking into different areas. When I had you all to our lab, and thank you for coming there, I wanted you to be able to see the door plug in person, to put eyes on it, rather than looking at a picture or looking at a diagram. I think putting eyes on something makes it that much more real, and you can understand what we're looking at. So I wanted you to be able to see what we had reported in the preliminary report with respect to which bolts were missing. There are a lot of bolts, and there was a lot of that hold components on this door plug and on the frame. And there are 4 safety-critical retaining bolts. Their sole purpose is retaining this door plug on the airframe. And so what I wanted you to understand is what we saw is there were no 4 bolts there, and how we were able to determine that with our lab equipment, and then later confirm it through some pictures that we received from Boeing. I also wanted you to be able to see that there were 154 flights in total that had occurred. And so we could see at the top of that door plug how that door plug was migrating upwards until it finally came out on the 154th flight. I wanted you to be able to see that with your eyes. Since that time, we have received all the information, and thank you to the FAA administrator for this. We asked him for all the information that they had gathered with respect to the inspections of the other door plugs that outside of Alaska 1282, we were able to confirm that we were talking about different bolts. Their bolts are the bolts that they were talking about that were loose, were bolts around, again, holding components on the door plug or on the frame itself. But the 4 bolts that we're talking about, with the exception of a few missing cotter pins that they caught, the 4 bolts we're talking about were safety critical. Those were not the ones that FAA had identified in their work. So now just transitioning to the full investigation, we have different teams that are digging into different pieces of this investigation. Our structures team, our operations team, survival factors team, our maintenance records team is what I'm updating you on today, which is in Renton right now, interviewing a number of personnel, Spirit Aerospace contractors, 3 of them, and then we have a number of other personnel who work for Boeing, who we understand were doing work around the area around the same time that work was being done on the rivets and the door plug in about mid-September to try to identify the list of 25 people because it's important that we begin to dig into those procedures, those policies to understand, where we need to go on this investigation. We've asked repeatedly for information. Again, this is not new to this, not something that's just specific to this investigation. We find this on other investigations where we repeatedly ask and don't get information, but we continue to ask. And so for this one, there's a lot of information missing. I do not understand how we could not get the names at this point, 2 months down the road, and it's not for a lack of trying. Now we're down to interviewing people who were in that area. We asked for security camera footage. Renton has security cameras all over the facility. We asked for security camera footage so we can understand who did the work.
What's the explanation for why you haven't received that information from Boeing or Spirit? I guess it's Boeing in this case.
We have not gotten a good answer. We have either not gotten an answer or they're saying they're trying to provide it but can't find it. On the security camera footage, all their security camera footage is erased within 30 days and overwritten.
Just to be clear, are you referring to the names of people who were working that shift, or are you talking about the documents?
The documents, they can't find it. The names we haven't been provided.
Let me ask you about what you said about the 3 subcontractors. Those are subcontractors of Spirit Aerosystem,
That's correct.
and that became known. It was thought that Spirit Aerosystem actual employees were doing work which turns out to be being done by subcontractors of Spirit. Is that
That's
right?
correct. That's correct.
And are
With
you
3 different entities for the 3 different people
Are you
we interviewed.
missing information in regard to that circumstance?
We are not at this time. It was a surprise to us that we were not told before being contacted by the individual employees that they were contractors and who they were contractors for. But we don't have other information that is missing right now from Spirit Aerospace, to my knowledge.
Two quick questions that I want to ask before my time expires further. The NTSB, and do you make interim recommendations as far as safety? So that even though your final report's not done, are there things that are occurring at your recommendation that makes flying more safe?
We can issue urgent recommendations, urgent safety recommendations at any point if we believe they're warranted. But we have to base those urgent safety recommendations on factual information. So when we believe we need to, we do not hesitate in doing that. We don't wait till the end.
Is there any difference of views in NTSB's findings to date and the FAA findings to date?
No, I have not identified any differences. We have some differences in work that we've done and differences in responsibility, but I will say they've been very helpful throughout the course of our investigation. We appreciate that work.
Chairman, while it's not as much money as you would have requested this week, we're expected to pass the appropriation bill that funds NTSB, and it's an 8.2% increase, which is significantly higher than most other agencies within our capabilities of a budget that is less spending this year than last.
I strongly want, I want to just say thank you. It is really appreciated. Many times at the NTSB, we have to look at trade-offs. We have a number of lab equipment that's ending its useful life. And oftentimes I'm looking at, can we train somebody or can we replace lab equipment? That's not a trade-off I like to make. And so that investment is a direct investment in safety with the NTSB. And I just want to thank you so much for providing that and also for including our reauthorization bill in FAA. Thank you so much. I know I'm a strong advocate on our funding, and I appreciate you hearing the needs of our workforce.
Thank you. Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Chair Cantwell, and Chair Hamadeh. Thank you for your hard work and for your commitment to safety and to finding out the causes of everything that's going on. I want to talk a little bit about not necessarily what happened with this plane, but just our aging infrastructure overall that impacts aviation safety. Because aviation professionals are only as effective as the infrastructure and technology that they rely on. And the average age of an FAA Air Route Traffic Control Center, the actual center, is over 60 years old. These facilities regularly operate with degraded technology systems, resulting in an inability to access accurate wind speed. The failure of radio frequencies within congested airspace is really hurting them sometimes, and we have malfunctioning of runway lights. Many airports also lack functioning surface surveillance radar systems that use to track airborne and taxiing planes as well as airport ground vehicles, meaning that some controllers have limited visual awareness of the aircraft that they're directing. In lieu of a functioning radar system in the air traffic control facility, many controllers are actually filling the gaps by resorting to using public flight tracking websites that aren't approved by the FAA. Perhaps the most alarming are the reports that the FAA lacks the funding to install runway warning systems to help prevent these runway collisions. Only a few dozen of the nation's commercial airports have surface surveillance collision warning systems. So, Chair Hamadeh, how can we improve existing aviation technology and infrastructure to reduce this potential risk, manage this complicated airspace? It's not just the air traffic controller staffing. We know that's important, but how does this all fit in? Because this is another piece of the safety that we need to worry about.
Yeah, I would just say what I've said previously in other testimony, which is robust funding for the FAA. The FAA needs funding for all, whether it's a DOT, modal administration, or the NTSB. That investment is an investment in safety, and they need that support in terms of funding, whether it's for runway lights or whether it's for technology to prevent runway incursions. There's also technology that we have advocated for and recommended going back 23 years and asked the FAA to require airlines to include technology in the cockpit of an airplane to alert pilots when there's an impending runway incursion. That is something that they could act on right now without having funding. But the other side of that is investment in technology in our towers to ensure safety and to supplement safety for the workforce.
Thank you. Well, I hope we continue to get more infrastructure money for our airports because we have a lot more emerging aviation technology on the forefront. I know that we have a lot of this going on in Nevada, but it's going on all across the country, and it's new, it's exciting. We have air taxis that are delivering a tremendous promise, and drones that are going to do delivery for your packages, maybe your medications. This can help in urban and rural settings. We know that's being tested across the country. But all of these new technologies in airspace really raise an additional layer of aviation safety concerns as U.S. airspace becomes much more complex with all these new entrants. So again, I know we need the investment. Maybe the airlines need to do some, but we need to do our part. How should the aviation community, how should we realistically look at integrating these new technologies like air taxis, the unmanned air vehicles for drone delivery, into the aging system, like you said, that's just dealing with so many near misses and so many other issues because our technology is aging. How do we integrate this and move forward?
Well, I can tell you speak to what the NTSB is doing. On the safety side, we just need to make sure that innovation isn't number one. Safety has to lead. Safety always has to be number one. When it comes to the NTSB's work with emerging technologies, whether it's AAM or drones or any other type of technology that is emerging, we just need to be ready. So the investment, and I appreciate Senator Moran and his advocacy, and Senator Cantwell and others on this committee advocacy for NTSB's funding for FY24 and also in the reauthorization bill, because that will help prepare us for when we are doing our investigations for any of that emerging technology. We have done some recent ones. There are advantages to some of those investigations where we've looked at doing investigations even in testing and development to make sure the industry understands our investigative process while also for us to ensure we are keeping up with the technologies that are out there.
Well, thank you. In light of what you said, I hope that the NTSB is not going to retire its most wanted list of safety priorities, because I think that's really important for all of us to know as far as what we need to invest in going forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I did have some questions. I know that Senator Fisher mentioned some of this earlier as relates to electric vehicles. The weight of some of these vehicles, including, I know you mentioned, the battery alone can be the weight of a Honda Civic or a Toyota Corolla. And so there's certainly safety issues there as it relates to guardrails and other vehicles on the road. You would agree with that, right?
Yes.
There's also issues, I want to talk about our infrastructure too. The weight of these vehicles, the strain that it can have on parking garages, roads, and bridges. the amount of money that will be expended to either reinforce or repair. Who is looking at this? Because we have a mandate for auto manufacturers to produce 50% of their fleet to be electric vehicles by 2030. I know there's a new rule in the works to have that number increased. I don't know if it's 65% or 75% by 2032. That's being considered. So it seems to me we're entering this phase as it relates to these mandates for electric vehicles, and all of these repercussions, all of these ancillary concern, I don't know who's addressing it. So I'm asking you, are you guys looking at this? Who is looking at this? Because this seems to be a disaster on the horizon for the American people and our infrastructure, but I don't hear a lot of talk about it.
Thank you, Senator. I have raised this consistently over the past year and a half, starting with the Transportation Research Board, where I raised concerns with respect to increasing size and weight of all vehicles, but particularly the weight of electric vehicles, that we really needed to look at the safety impact, not just on crashes, but to our infrastructure as well, and protecting people. The whole reason why we have a guardrail is to protect people when there is a crash, yet it wouldn't withstand some of the crashes with some of these high weights of heavy vehicles, including heavy electric vehicles, as was demonstrated by the University of Nebraska. Somebody needs to take action here. We have repeatedly flagged it. It is within the Department of Transportation's purview to do that, and I encourage them strongly to get ahead of it. We're behind right now.
And I know that as it relates to first responders who are responding to, crashes or other, that are involved, that lithium batteries are involved with, what is your take on the safety for our first responders as they're responding to these EV crashes?
It's a significant danger. We issued a report just a few years ago raising concerns regarding a number of crashes that we investigated involving electric vehicles and the risk to emergency responders from stranded energy inside the battery and components, and the significant potential for shock. We also raised concerns with respect to secondary responders, which are the tow truck operators, because we saw many of these vehicles reigniting on the tow truck and up to 5 days later in the tow yard.
So I guess the last question I have, so you've raised these issues, you've flagged the issues that relates to particularly weights to of the EVs to the Department of Transportation. Have you gotten a response? Has Secretary Buttigieg or anyone responded to that? Is there any momentum? What do you need from us?
So we have not issued a specific safety recommendation, but we've raised it as an emerging trend and a problem that they need to take seriously. I have not had further interaction.
Okay, we'll look forward to working with you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Peters.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Chair Hamady, thank you so much for being here today, and certainly appreciate your advocacy as well as your leadership at the NTSB. I serve as the Surface Transportation Subcommittee Chair of this committee, and I certainly strongly support reauthorizing the board, and as a member of Appropriations Committee as well, I know how important it is to provide robust funding, as you've mentioned already, and certainly that has to happen on a yearly basis, and you have to understand exactly what that money is or the amount, and that it will continue for you to plan accordingly. In particular, I note that you have called for increased year-over-year funding for your authorization request, reflecting the need for more resources in the coming years due to staffing and capacity needs, including relating to changing realities on the ground in our transportation system. One thing I'm particularly interested in is ensuring that the NTSB is able to meet the challenges of more connected and automated transportation system. I believe that connectivity and autonomous systems have the capability to reap huge rewards in terms of safety in the years ahead. And we have to do that, obviously, with oversight and investigations, but all of that requires the resources to make that happen. So my question for you, ma'am, is can you discuss the importance of having NTSB reauthorization and robust appropriations for NTSB specifically to enable the board to meet the demands for cutting-edge transportation technology and increased capacity needs related to data analytics in the coming years?
Yeah, right now, Senator, we're a small agency. Before the CR, we had 444 people. When I came in as chair, we had 397, and I rapidly filled our vacancies. As a result of the CR, we have a hiring freeze, and we've gone down to 429. We cannot bring another person in. Where that's a significant issue is our employees, our investigators, are doing more with less. So if you just take our structural engineer, our lead structural engineer on Alaska 1282, he's on duty 50% of his year, 50%. He has one trainee right now, but it will take her, she's excellent, but it will take her 1 to 3 years of training just to handle a major on her own. So we need the people, not just in order to do the work and do the work well. We also need the people to make sure that we have timely investigations, which I think Congress and the American public deserve. I was able to work with our team to reduce the backlog that we had of investigations over 2 years. Those were almost 500 over 2 years when I took over as chair. We hit 0 on October 1st. We're in a CR situation, having gone down significantly, I think pretty significantly on our aviation team. We're back up 15 over 2 years. This is the direct result, not to mention the fact that I'm making daily choices with our team on how do we deal with $14 million of requests internally for needs on training, for needs on new lab equipment, which is at the end of its useful life, or, you know, do I fund because before I became chair, our entire electrical AV and streaming system in our public boardroom, which provides information to the public when we hold a public board meeting. How do I get that information out if that equipment isn't working? I ask, you know, we have put out feelers for how much that will cost to replace, and I get back between $1 and $2.5 million. Do I invest in that to make sure the public can watch our board meetings, or do I invest in training that our people need, or do I invest in our people? These are the tough choices we have to make every single day. We are looking at these numbers every single day and very cognizant. The NTSB is the world standard when it comes to investigating accidents, crashes, and other events. We need to remain the gold standard, and the way we do that is through investment, not starving us. And so we appreciate your support. I will tell you, without reauthorization, what happens is we don't have a number out there, so appropriators say, well, you don't have a number, we'll come up with a number. I personally went to OMB, went to the White House and said, I need 145. I need 150 for FY25. I personally did that because that is what we need to do for the agency. But if we don't have those numbers and we don't have an authorization, people just pick what they think is right, but it's not what we need. With that said, I very much appreciate the 140. It is a significant increase above where we are right now, but in the authorization bill in the Senate authorization bill for the following 4 years, it leaves it at 145 for each year. We need to increase that over time. The flat funding would hurt us.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Vance.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to Chair Hamady for being here and for all your work. I know a lot of folks have focused on the Alaska Airlines questions. I want to focus on the train derailment in East Palestine. And specifically, Madam Chair, I want to focus on this question of whether the controlled burn was actually necessary in East Palestine. To sort of recap for folks, the mushroom cloud, the chemical mushroom cloud that sort of captured headlines across the country was the result of a controlled burn. And what those of us who are sort of focused on this issue were told is that if you hadn't done the controlled burn, there would have been an uncontrolled explosion because the situation on the ground was just incredibly chaotic and dynamic, you had to do the controlled burn to prevent the uncontrolled explosion. And your team has done a very good job. I commend you and your team on actually looking into whether this was necessary. And you'll forgive me for requesting brief answers to questions because I have a lot of them, and I just want to walk through in detail what you folks have found. This is based on public reporting that me and my team have gone through. So February 3rd, 2023 derailment of the train. Is it true that Norfolk Southern's contractors monitored temperatures on one of the chemical tank cars from the afternoon of February 5th into the afternoon of February 6th, which is when the controlled burn happened, and communicated their initial readings to Oxyvinyls, the shippers in charge of the vinyl chloride cars?
That's accurate, Senator.
Is it true that these readings indicated an initial temperature of 135 degrees Fahrenheit at 4 p.m. on February 5th, which eventually declined to 126 degrees Fahrenheit at 9:30 a.m. on February 6th, at which point it stabilized?
That's correct, Senator. It was stabilized well before the vent and burn, many hours before.
So declining temperatures, you would think, and stabilized temperatures are consistent not with something that needs to be exploded, but with something that can be dealt with in a slightly less catastrophic way. At least that's my read on it. But is it true that the chemical shipper Oxyvinyls concluded that the reported and stabilized tank car temperatures were too low for a runaway chemical reaction, meaning the sort of thing that would lead to an uncontrolled explosion?
That's correct. They had testified that polymerization was not occurring. In order for polymerization to occur, which was the Norfolk Southern and their contractors' justification for the vent and burn, you would have to have rapidly increasing temperatures and some sort of infusion of oxygen, neither of which occurred.
Right. And just to be clear, you would need both of those things. It's not an either or. You need both of them to precipitate polymerization, which would lead to an uncontrolled situation. So is it true that Norfolk Southern's contractors testified to the NTSB that they were not certain a chemical reaction was occurring in the derailed vinyl chloride tank car?
They testified to that, yes, sir.
Is it correct that the chemical shippers testified that there was no free radical agent or sufficient heat trajectory to justify Norfolk Southern contractors' assessment that a chemical reaction was occurring?
That's correct.
So from this assessment, is it your understanding that Norfolk Southern's contractors lacked scientific basis to support their conclusion that polymerization was occurring in the derailed VCM tank cars?
Yes. In fact, they were informed by Oxyvinyls of the information that should have been taken by the contractors in their decision-making. But yes, they did not have that. They lacked the scientific background to address that.
So let me just go to sort of one final question here. We combine all these facts together. Your reporting thus far concludes that Norfolk Southern's contractors' recommendation to conduct a controlled burn lacked sufficient scientific basis, disregarded available temperature data, and contradicted expert feedback from the shipping firm on site. Now, this was all told to the decision makers on the ground that they had to make a decision in less than 13 minutes to blow up all 5 of these toxic chemical cars without any other voices being included to offer a contrary opinion. Is that right?
That's correct.
So, again, I appreciate your work on this, but just to sort of summarize, this is an extraordinary finding. We were told effectively that there were 2 bad options, the controlled burn or the uncontrolled explosion. And it seems, based on the data that we have, that there was not a ton of reason to do the uncontrolled burn. And that, of course, is what spread toxic chemicals all over this community and the surrounding region. It's really an extraordinary finding. It goes to highlight the importance of your work. But I also have to note that residents on the ground talk about the fact that immediately after the uncontrolled burn, they moved the tank cars and train traffic was moving through their town and moving through their community. I won't ask you to speak to motivations here, but when you have an unnecessary, uncontrolled burn that poisoned a lot of people, that then led to rapid transit of train traffic, a lot of people, including me, are wondering, did they do this not because it was necessary, but because it allowed them to move traffic and freight more quickly? And if so, That is an extraordinary thing that I think requires a lot of further work from this committee and from others. But we will stop there because I see my time is up. Thank you, Chair Hamady.
May I add something to that?
Please.
Senator, it's even, I would say the factual information in our docket shows that Oxyvinyls was on scene and providing information to Norfolk Southern and their contractors on the 4th, 5th, and 6th. They informed them that polymerization, they believed polymerization was not occurring and there was no justification to do a vent and burn. Rightfully, Norfolk Southern's contractors said, ruled out hot tapping and transloading because it would have been a potential safety issue for their employees, but there was another option, let it cool down. It was cooling down. We know for a fact that when that pressure relief device went off, that it had to have been above 185 degrees. Later, much later, over the course of 22 hours, that tank car was cooling, not to mention the other 4 tank cars that were only between 64 and 69 degrees. So Oxyvinyls was on scene providing information to Norfolk Southern's contractor, who was in the room when the decision was made, and when advice was given to the governor of Ohio, to the incident commander. They were not given full information because no one was told Oxyvinyl was on scene. They were left out of the room. The incident commander didn't even know they existed. Neither did the governor. So they were provided incomplete information to make a decision.
Yes, go ahead, Senator Vance.
Oh, your mic.
My line of questioning, I just want to be clear here, is not a criticism of the incident commander or of the governor. I think it's a criticism of the people on the ground who provided inadequate information. And provided inadequate information, I think, to the great detriment of the community on the ground. This is extraordinary work by your team, but this is a really, really troubling set of circumstances. This town very well may have been poisoned to facilitate the rapid movement of freight, or at the very least, it was poisoned for reasons that we can't identify. That should really concern every single person on this committee.
Senator Vance, can't wait to get your bill on the Senate floor. And as I said in my opening comments today, this is so critical because it requires this kind of reporting so that local communities can plan appropriately. And they should disclose what they are pushing through a community. So, yes, I hope that we can get this done. And
thank you so much.
Yes, Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chair Hamady, thank you so much for coming before the committee and for your tireless dedication to safety across all modes of transportation. I'd like to discuss for a moment our work to improve the safety of helicopter tours. In 2019, the crash of an air tour helicopter in Hawaii killed 6 passengers and the pilot, including a mother and a daughter from Madison, Wisconsin. For that reason, it has become a real priority for me, and I know it has also been for Senator Schatz. NTSB's final report on that accident in May of 2022 cites several safety recommendations that are still outstanding by the FAA, and also issues new recommendations. And I was pleased to see the FAA propose new safety improvements in August of 2023. And I worked closely with Senator Schatz and Chair Cantwell to include additional safety improvements in the FAA bill that passed this committee just a few weeks ago. I'm wondering if you could provide a status update on how you view the current safety standards for helicopter air tours, and do you believe that the safety provisions included in the Senate version of the FAA bill would improve the safety of these tours?
Thank you very much for your work on this issue and for Senator Schatz's work on this issue. I think it's critical. The NTSB believes in one level of safety. Before I became NTSB chair or before I worked on the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, if I showed up with my family to take an air tour, I would not know to ask, what are the qualifications of the crew? What are your operating standards? What are your operating rules? What are your maintenance procedures? You wouldn't normally ask those questions. If you were somebody who shows up for a parachute jump flight, you think my biggest risk is jumping out of the plane, not getting on the plane, which also crashed in Hawaii. So we believe you're a paying passenger, whether you're on Part 121, Part 135, Part 91, you deserve the same level of safety. And we have advocated strongly for a set of regulatory standards that address just that. We've seen no action on that. This is something I have been extremely passionate about since I came to the board, whether it was Fly Nyan in New York, where we literally listened to people's last moments that were strapped into a helicopter on an air tour with a Home Depot harness that was supposed to hold them in, and they couldn't unhook it. They drowned. That is horrific. So still, we don't have the standards we've recommended. We did an entire report on ensuring safety in revenue passenger operations under Part 91. We looked at incidents or accidents, terrible tragedies in Hawaii, Arizona, I mentioned New York, Connecticut, with a B-17 historic adventure flight that crashed. And each time we continue to say safety needs to improve, and each time we've been ignored. The public deserves better. FAA should issue standards to ensure their safety. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. I know several of my colleagues have already raised the issue of train derailments and rail safety. I'm very concerned that the derailment rate of the largest 4 Class 1 railroads have increased by 23% in the last decade. While not nearly as devastating as the derailment in East Palestine that was just being discussed, my home state of Wisconsin saw a few train derailments over the last year as well, including one in DeSoto, Wisconsin, that led to some of the rail cars temporarily ending up in the Mississippi River. Would you be able to speak to your belief as to why we're seeing an increase, not a decrease, in derailments and in the past decade, and specifically what we need to be doing to confront that challenge?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Senator. One thing that is of particular concern, so the derailment rate is sort of a combined rate from mainline track and for the yards. We are seeing a significant increase in derailments and tragedies in the yards. That is where we're very concerned about employee safety. We've seen that repeatedly. We've issued a number of recommendations. We have a lot of open investigations. For Norfolk Southern alone, we have 8 investigations that are currently open, and we're also doing a safety culture review separate from East Palestine. But in particular, we have 190 safety recommendations that we've issued that are currently open to improve rail safety, whether it's preventing fatigue or providing for increased inspection or new technologies to supplement, not supplant workers, supplement the work to ensure safety. Those 190 have not been acted upon. Happy to provide those for the hearing record, but they can be today, and I hope they will.
Thank you, Senator Baldwin. Senator Duckworth, thank you so much for your leadership as the chair of the subcommittee. We so appreciate your help.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your leadership in getting the FAA reauthorization bill out of committee in a bipartisan way. I also want to thank Chair Hamady for being here today and for your work on the MAX 9 investigation. I have a few things I want to say in a statement before I ask you some short questions. It's because I'm particularly concerned about NTSB's finding that pilots on Flight 1282 were unaware that the cockpit door was designed to automatically open during the kind of rapid depressurization event that took place on that Alaskan airline flight when the door plug fell out. As a pilot, I cannot convey strongly enough how critical it is for the flight crew to be fully informed of the features on the flight deck. An in-flight emergency is not the time for a flight crew to first learn about something like this. And then also, as we saw with MCAS, pilots not knowing about a flight deck feature can be deadly. This is even more alarming considering that this is the third time that Boeing has kept information about MAX flight deck features from pilots. And the FAA in the past has let Boeing get away with it the first 2 times. This has become a dangerous pattern which FAA absolutely needs to break. At the start of the MAX program, Boeing removed MCAS from the flight manual with FAA's blessing. Subsequent investigations raised questions about how candid Boeing had been with FAA about the significance of MCAS. Despite this, when evidence emerged of an internal plan at Boeing to intentionally downplay the significance of MCAS to a regular, FAA did not investigate. So they reduced the significance of MCAS to just a regular concern. These are internal Boeing, so I have my poster here, which is the internal email within Boeing itself that says this. These are internal Boeing meeting minutes showing employees planning to not use the term MCAS outside of Boeing because, and I quote, if we emphasize MCAS as a new function, there may be greater certification and training impact, end quote. They also show a member of Boeing's Organizational Designation Authority, the ODA, approving this plan. Yet, FAA took no action in response to this evidence. According to the Department of Transportation Inspector General, FAA did not even consider finding out who this ODA unit member was to ensure that he or she was not still authorized to perform certification work on behalf of the FAA. Boeing also intentionally hid from pilots the fact that the AOA disagree alert on nearly 80% of Boeing's 737 MAX 8 aircraft was not functioning. When Boeing discovered this defect, it did not report it to FAA or inform airlines or pilots, opting instead to keep it a secret. Keep producing planes with this same known defect and wait years to fix it until a planned software update in the future. Boeing's plan was disrupted, however, when the first 737 MAX crashed in 2018 and worldwide attention began to focus on AOA sensors. The company was forced to admit that the AOA disagree alert was not functioning on most 737 airplanes and that they knew about it. Unlike MCAS, this was not a safety-related issue. However, this was a clear violation of the MAX's approved flight design. And this is a finding from the U.S. Department of Transportation Office of the Inspector General. DOT's Inspector General recently looked into this and said, and I quote, all features included in the type design are mandatory, whether or not they are required for safety. Thus, while the disagree message was not necessary to meet FAA safety regulations, it was required to be installed and functional as part of the approved type design, end quote. Yet, FAA took no action against Boeing for this brazen, intentional, and repeated disregard of its approved type design. If FAA is not going to bother to enforce its own regulations, why would Boeing ever obey them? So, Chair Homendy, here are my questions. Would you agree that, as a matter of safety, pilots need to know what features are on the flight deck?
Absolutely. It is a matter of safety. They need to be fully informed and fully informed so they know what to expect.
Thank you. Would you also agree that it is dangerous for pilots to first learn about features on the flight deck during an in-flight emergency?
Yes, and I would extend that to the entire flight crew, including the cabin crew. One member in this particular flight was hit by the door as it blew out. There was a lot going on at the time. It was complete chaos. They need to know what to expect, and this was a complete surprise.
Thank you. You're referring to the Alaska airline incident?
Yes, Alaska 1282.
Yes, thank you. If FAA does not enforce its required type design, do you think that that would make a manufacturer more or less likely to abide by that type design?
This is a difficult one for me to answer because this is not something that we've investigated.
Okay, thank you. And I am over time. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair Hamady.
Senator Welch.
Thank you very much. You know, the question of safety is obviously incredibly important. The question of cost is also very important. And my understanding is that right now, when you're making assessments of safety, your focus solely is on the safety and not on cost. And I know some of my colleagues think that you should be responsible to make a cost-benefit analysis as you're considering safety factors. I'm a skeptic of that. I think that decision should be made after the recommendation is made. And I just want you to comment on that, because both are legitimate concerns, but I think all of us here would agree that safety has to be paramount. So if there is a proposal that you would have to do, your agency would have to make the cost-benefit analysis, how would that affect safety?
Significantly. The NTSB is founded on safety. Our entire mission is safety. We don't consider cost-benefit of any particular recommendation. It's a recommendation, 80% of which are adopted acceptably, voluntarily by the recipients. Which shows a pretty high success rate as it is. What I will say, when it comes to our recommendations, the recipients have a choice. You either implement them or you don't. It's a recommendation. It's not a requirement. We hope you do, but it's certainly a recommendation. What I will say, the regulator, if they choose to take on one of our recommendations and it requires a regulation, they go through cost-benefit analysis. That is their authority. Listen, so I have heard this a number of times. The NTSB's mandate is to save lives. So if I am out there, if our investigators and I are out there at a particular scene of a terrible, terrible tragedy, can you imagine if we do an entire investigation based on facts and then have to sit there and determine, oh, what is economically feasible that would prevent this from happening again? That's terrible. What the public deserves, what you deserve, is to know what would prevent it from happening again. What would prevent that tragedy from reoccurring? Then you can decide. You can consider that recommendation and determine whether you should move that forward. Well, so the public deserves to know what is right. What is the right thing to do? Also, I'll just mention, if we ever had to do cost-benefit analysis, it would take another year to even issue another report. So talk about timeliness. That goes right out the window.
Well, thank you. I do agree with that. I also think that where there are cost issues, then you've got to look to the manufacturer to figure out a better way to do it and maintain safety. So it would be an inappropriate shifting of the burden on your organization that is committed to safety if we impose that obligation on you. Be a real conflict. Another question.
Can I just add? Also, why should we evaluate the safety of what an industry, the economics of if we issue a recommendation to an entity that was part of an event, why should we consider what is feasible or cost effective for them to implement versus what's right? So I agree with you, Senator. Thank you very much for that question.
Well, thank you. Just, I know you've been asked a lot about Boeing, but let me ask you this. How can Congress support the NTSB efforts to enhance the agency's understanding of Boeing's quality and safety management system as we consider NTSB reauthorization?
The NTSB has a lot of authority that we can use in our investigations. We certainly have subpoena authority, and we're not afraid to use it if we need to. We hope it doesn't come to that. We hope that we can get cooperative participation, whether it's our interviews or working with the parties to our investigation, but it does concern us that we don't have certain information we should have today. With that said, we have the ability to get that information. I will say one thing about the NTSB and reauthorization and funding for us is that when a major occurs, that becomes number one for us. But say our structural engineer on this one, he handles 50 to 20 cases a year. What happens to those other 15 to 20 cases? They get moved aside so we can focus on 1282. People died in those other 15 to 20 cases. This is why we need personnel. This is why we need to ensure their training, and why we need to ensure that we're investing in every mode and every office of the agency, including our critical lab equipment.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Madam Chair.
I think we need to, I think the prompting of that question might be the delay in a real SMS system. And I think some people may, in the past, have articulated that a cost-benefit analysis of that made it, I don't know what the right word is, but that you could go with a lesser SMS system, a non-real SMS system.
Oh, no, you have to have a robust safety management system to ensure safety.
So I think his comments in asking this question weren't as much directed towards the NTSB doing a safety system analysis, but this perception that a real SMS never got implemented because people argued on the cost-benefit analysis. I agree with you. Our ANCSA report, legislation we passed, mandated a real SMS. And so we are waiting for that to happen, and we are going to hold the FAA accountable to make sure that it is implemented.
Understood. Thank you.
So there's no substitute for that. My colleague from Georgia.
Thank you so very much, Madam Chair. Chair Hamady, welcome back. I would like to briefly revisit the tragic and deadly crashes of Lion Air Flight 610 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302. Can you remind me who manufactured these aircraft?
The manufacturer is Boeing, sir.
Thank you. Now let's revisit the 2023 East Palestine, Ohio train derailment. Can you remind me which freight rail carrier operated this train?
Norfolk Southern, sir.
Thank you. And what about the recent recall of 2 million vehicles with autopilot technology that is the subject of a multi-year National Highway Traffic Safety Administration review? Who manufactures those vehicles?
Tesla, sir.
Thank you. Finally, an incident we've heard a lot about today, the Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 door plug blowout. Who was in charge of manufacturing that aircraft?
Boeing, sir.
So I see a pattern here. At the heart of each of these incidents is a massive corporation, a Fortune 500 economic engine for the country that also has a deep lobbying bench. And I'm concerned that each of these incidents, though unique in their circumstances, may have been the result of a focus on production targets and profit margins over safety, related to the question that my colleague, Senator Welch, asked. In other words, an insufficient safety culture in our transportation system and among its suppliers. And ironically, we've got colleagues of mine who are asking whether or not we should do the cost-benefit analysis as a part of your analysis of these and sometimes tragic incidents. Chair Hamady, the NTSB has investigated each of these incidents, and the companies ultimately tasked with ensuring the safety of their products. Throughout your investigations, have you seen any evidence that these companies may be maximizing profits at the expense of safety?
We do not have evidence of that either way.
Okay, so what tools does the NTSB have to investigate and improve the safety culture within these companies and across the broader transportation system?
With respect to safety culture, we delve in on safety culture in many of our investigations. For Norfolk Southern, we are doing a separate investigation involving organizational safety culture with respect to Norfolk Southern, because we are currently investigating 8 accidents involving Norfolk Southern that occurred in a relatively short time period. So we are doing that safety culture assessment, and we've done similar assessments, including on Metro North in the past. We are also digging in on safety culture with respect to the Alaska 1282.
If I can interrupt, what tools do you have?
We have human performance experts at the NTSB who delve into safety culture within the agency. So we have expert investigators. Certainly we have subpoena authority if we can't get records. But we have expert investigators that can identify deficiencies and recommend action.
Yeah, but you can understand why these incidents are deeply concerning to us and anybody who's paying attention. So let me ask you this. Does the NTSB need additional tools from Congress to improve the safety culture within these companies?
Our best resource is our people. They are top-notch, world-renowned investigators who know how to evaluate a safety culture within any entity and identify deficiencies. We need people, and we need training for those people. And so that is a direct investment in safety.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm ready. Okay, well, thank you, Madam Chair. And
I mean, we can let Senator Lujan go if you want.
Oh, it's okay, I'm ready.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. I want to continue on the Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 questioning. Of course, it's on everybody's mind across the country. It's really on my constituents' mind, given how much we fly Alaska Airlines, which is a very good airline that I fly like almost every weekend. But let me ask you specifically on that, and then I have a specific Alaska state safety question. I think you know the Alaska Airlines was the first airline with the FAA-accepted safety management system. In previous hearings, we discussed the value of the SMS and the scalability of the SMS for smaller operators. Can you talk about the importance of the safety management system, not just in terms of enhancing safety in the episode that you're investigating, but in particular, what you envision a more mature SMS system being able to be helpful in terms of safety, big airlines and even smaller operators?
Yeah, there are 4 pillars for safety management systems. It's everything from safety policy and having the comprehensive safety policies in place. It's safety risk assessment, safety assurance, and safety promotion, which really gets to safety culture and training of the workforce. Having a robust safety management system is key for any operator. I do agree with your comments on scalability. We do believe that any operator, whether large or small, can proactively identify and address those risks, continue to monitor how they have addressed those risks to ensure that how they address them is effective, and then continue to continually reevaluate those risks to ensure safety, while also promoting safety among their workforce, whether it's 2 or 3 people or it's hundreds of people.
Thank you for that answer. Let me turn to aviation safety in Alaska. In February 2020, the NTSB issued a report calling for the FAA and NTSB to take a much more comprehensive approach to improving aviation safety in my state. As you know, whether it's crashes or fatalities, we have the highest per capita numbers in the country. A lot of reasons for that. Big state, not as much infrastructure as we need. Challenging weather, certainly. This led to the report, your report, NTSB, so thank you, led to the launch of a very important program, the FAA Alaska Aviation Safety Initiative, what we call FASI in Alaska. And again, that's with the FAA and NTSB and, of course, our aviation community in Alaska. I want your commitment to continue to focus on that. It's a really big deal. A lot of these numbers are from the lack of infrastructure. My view is we're all Americans, and if it costs a little bit more for infrastructure in Alaska, then we deserve it because everybody else in the lower 48 has significant more infrastructure in terms of aviation than we do, despite the challenges in Alaska. I want to thank the chair. The FAA reauthorization bill that we just passed here with very strong bipartisan support worked to address a number of these challenges highlighted in your February 2020 report and in the broader FAA FOSI initiative dealing with upgrading and maintenance of weather observation systems, increased utilization of IFR routes, additional ground-based ADSB transmitters, a whole host of things. But can I get your commitment to continue to work with my office, the FAA, this committee, to address the issues raised in your 2020 NTSB report to make Alaska aviation safer? Again, sometimes we hear, well, geez, you know, it's going to cost more because we got to put more infrastructure there. Well, my view is, yeah, it's going to cost more. These are Americans just like they would be if they were in any other state in the lower 48. So can you give me an update from your perspective on how that's going, FOSI, and then any other issues we need to be working on?
Yeah, first of all, you do have my commitment. I also would like to say I've been to our Alaska regional offices. Our director of the Office of Aviation Safety, which is behind me, just came back from our regional office in Alaska. I do want to thank you for your relationship, your staff's relationship with our investigators and our lead investigator
we
up there.
think
It's
we
critical.
think they're great. We really
Yeah, well, likewise. So thank you. It's an incredible relationship. Really appreciate it. I do think you have unique and great needs, whether it's infrastructure or investment in weather technology or a host of safety needs, and you deserve the investment. We'll support that. We'll support the work of the FAA throughout that initiative. It was critical for the NTSB. We made that recommendation. We believe in it, and you certainly have my commitment to work on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I want to thank the chair again on helping us with a lot of the amendments we had to the FAA bill that directly came from your 2020 report and the FOSI initiative, but we're not done yet. And so thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The main transportation system in Alaska is by air, and we want to get this right. And we want to help them in whatever ways we can. We have a vote underway, and we have a second one following it, so we're going to wrap up here soon. Senator Lujan?
Thank you, Chair Cantwell, and Chair Hamady, thank you so much for being here today. Yesterday, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration closed their comment period on their advance notice of proposed rulemaking on impaired driving technology. And I was heartened to see over 17,000 comments submitted, many from victims sharing their own stories on why this technology is so important. In 2021, I was proud to pass this legislation, the HALT and RIDE Act, with colleagues Senator Peters, Capito, and Rick Scott as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. And this provision required that impaired driving prevention technology be in all new cars after 2026. Chair Hamady, yes or no, does the impaired driving provision of the bipartisan infrastructure law align with NTSB's prior recommendations on the most important tools we can use to address impaired driving?
Yes, Senator.
I appreciate that, and I look forward to reading through all of the comments from the automotive suppliers and manufacturers who want to be part of finding a solution. As I saw at the recent auto show here in Washington, D.C., and in others across the country, there's technology out there that is already doing a lot of this work. And I was really encouraged to see major automotive manufacturers behind much of this technology as well. That was one of the goals here, was to also create a market so that innovation would be unleashed and I'm seeing it happen. Now, Chair Hamady, yes or no, will requiring impaired driving prevention technology in vehicles reduce the number of traffic fatalities on our roadways and save thousands of lives each year?
Yes, and that's backed by research.
I appreciate that. I was proud to also lead on an amendment to reauthorize the NTSB as part of the FAA reauthorization, working closely with the chair of this committee, Maria Cantwell, where we were able to earn support through the chair's leadership to be able to get this done. Now, Chair Hamady, I know that during your tenure as chair, the NTSB has eliminated the pre-existing backlog of investigations, and I want to commend you for that, some of which had previously gone incomplete for years. Now, Chair Hamady, yes or no, did the increase in staffing levels over the past 3 years enable the NTSB to eliminate this backlog of investigations?
Yes, it was a combination of increase in staffing levels and improvements to our process, which I have to say, I set the vision. It was the team who did the work, and I'm really proud of them.
Chair Hamady, yes or no, if Congress fails to provide the NSTB with sufficient resources, I think I got the acronym wrong, the NTSB with sufficient resources, will the impact the agency's ability to close the investigations in a timely manner? Will that negatively impact the ability to get that done?
Yes, and I can just show you right now, the nearly 500 investigations that were well over 2 years, some 3 and 4 years when I became chair, went down to 0 on October 1st. We went up from 397 employees to 444 employees. Beginning on October 1st, we hit a CR. And what happened? We went down to 400, today we're at 429 employees, and now we're 15 investigations right over the 2-year mark. It's a direct impact. If we have less employees, our employees are forced to do more with less. Our employees are our greatest resources, and they are key to improving safety.
Now, similar to the previous questions, Chair Hamady, in recent years, we've seen historic levels of traffic fatalities on our roadways. My question is, yes or no, would an increased authorization enable the NTSB to do even more to reduce the number of deaths each year on our roadways?
Yes, certainly we have millions of crashes that occur on our roads, and we have around 30 people in our highway safety office. They need more people.
And Chair Cantwell, I do have a few other questions pertaining to the investigation that I want to commend NTSB in conducting. I'll submit those into the record. Very much appreciate your time today, and I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Lujan. As I mentioned, we're running out of time just because we have 2 votes back to back. But I did want to submit some questions too for the record. I'm going to submit some things on East Palestine that I'd like answered. I also want to note that it's the 25th anniversary of Olympic pipeline explosion in Bellingham, Washington, which killed 3 children under the age of 19. The company's negligence was so severe that multiple company executives were sent to jail, and the judge in the case decried the lack of effective federal oversight. So I'm going to submit questions about the lack of investigation in the Keystone Pipeline, but what resources would help the board be more effective in being a pipeline safety watchdog? When do you deploy for pipeline incidents, and what pipeline safety would you recommend to Congress that we also do to enhance? So just for the record that we have that. I want to say that I also am going to send a letter to Boeing and the various manufacturers saying we need this information immediately as it relates to this investigation. Also, to send that to the FAA. I'm not sure why that hasn't happened, but one of the reasons we wanted to have you here today is that people need to listen to the NTSB. So often, you have done the painstaking work to actually get the data and information, and then the consequence is people don't listen to it. And so we are trying to do everything we can, as we did in ANCSA, to ask for a trend report. Part of the trend report was to bolster the NTSB's recommendations and to say, listen to them and monitor the trends. Your appearance here before the committee led to a conference the FAA was holding where you had already said that we needed to do something about near-miss technology at airports, and yet it wasn't being listened to. And the fact that we had you here that day, again, making people listen to that voice, resulted in the FAA and then the acting administrator at that point in time putting out a directive. So we're doing everything we can. We need to get this right. I think showing their support for your investigation could be so helpful. People shouldn't forget they're also the largest exporter of our country, aviation, and so we want to get this right. They're also a big key component of our DoD system. We need to get this right. So we need to help with the investigation so we can find out what in our system needs to be improved. I don't think it'll be a surprise to say that a true safety management system needs to be implemented. So with that, I see my colleague here. I'm going to ask that the hearing records remain open for 2 weeks and any senators submit questions for the record. And then at the conclusion of Senator Markey's questioning, that we be adjourned and he can gavel us out. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Since the door plug blew off the Boeing 737 MAX 9 in January, the National Transportation Safety Board has done excellent work to help identify the cause of this incident. But many experts believe that the answer goes back much further to Boeing's 1997 merger with the aerospace manufacturer McDonnell Douglas. It's well documented after this merger, Boeing's culture shifted from prioritizing engineering excellence to prioritizing the bottom line. This cultural shift is the systemic rust that allowed the door plug to break loose. In fact, the very subcontractor that was involved in the door plug blowout, Spirit Aerosystems, used to be a part of Boeing itself. Boeing sold off Spirit after the 1997 merger with McDonnell Douglas in an effort to outsource work and shed manufacturing costs. Even then, Boeing engineers warned that this profit-motivated strategy put the entire manufacturing process at risk. Fast forward to today. Those engineers have been proven correct. Boeing's weak oversight and failure to prioritize safety endangered the lives of the 180 passengers and crew aboard the Alaska Airlines flight. Chair Hamady, from your current and previous investigations, do you agree that Boeing's safety concerns stem from a culture that fails to prioritize safety?
I would say with respect to safety culture, that safety culture has to be a priority, whether it's for Boeing or for any other organization. For this particular accident or event, we are digging in on Boeing's safety culture. It's absolutely critical because the aviation industry's success has really been a result of having a good safety culture where you have people who can freely report and stop work if they feel there is a safety issue, where they know that an entity takes their reporting seriously, follows up in it, and promotes safety. We need that at Boeing and any other entity where we conduct an investigation.
But you do have concerns about the overall safety culture at Boeing.
Yes, we do, which is part of why we're that will be part of our investigation of the Alaska 1282 door plug blowout.
And you're going to look at the safety culture at Boeing beyond this incident across the entire company?
We are going to look, yes, we're going to look at safety culture within Boeing.
You're going to look at the cultural concerns broadly at Boeing.
Yes.
I think that's absolutely critical. Now I'd like to turn to the significant risk posed by autonomous vehicles. In the past 8 years, the NTSB has investigated multiple incidents involving autonomous driving technologies like Tesla's autopilot system that are designed to operate in specific road conditions, particularly on highways. In fact, in 2016, NTSB recommended that the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and auto manufacturers restrict drivers from activating these systems outside those road conditions. It's long past time that we take firm control of the wheel
and steer towards safety and implement this recommendation. So, Madam Chair, can you briefly explain the reasoning for this recommendation?
Yes, and in fact, I thought this may come up because you're a champion on this issue, and I just pulled Tesla's statement on, which is really their limitations on operational design domain. They warn on their website for those who have vehicles that some of their automation will not work in some areas, including areas of poor visibility, heavy rain, snow, fog, bright light, oncoming headlights, direct sunlight, mud, ice, snow, interference or obstruction by objects mounted onto the vehicle. Narrow, high curvature or winding roads, a damaged or misaligned bumper, an extremely hot or cold temperature, an area where the vehicle is not designed to operate using that technology. Who reads that? We have to make...
Well, that just leaves you're backing out of the driveway and then going back into your car again, because other than that, you're out on the road. This isn't like the Postal Service who rain, sleet, snow, gloom of night. They're saying, well, the sunlight might affect it, or the snow might affect it, or rainy conditions might affect it, or winding roads might affect it. So as I'm listening to that description, it sounds like, to me, it's not ready for prime time. It's not ready to be handed over to people who have grown up with a car that they drive where they expect the brakes or the steering wheel to all work, no matter where they're going. And not, oh, by the way, this thing that you just turned on could be extremely dangerous for your two kids in the back seat.
Well, and if it's only designed to be operated in a certain type of environment, it should be limited to those environments. We issued that recommendation to Tesla following the 2016 tragedy in Williston, Florida. We issued the same recommendation to NHTSA. We issued it again. Both have failed to act on those recommendations.
Yeah, in 1999, I was successful. We had to pass a safety bill after that Ford Explorer, mess. So one of the amendments I got was, on your dashboard, there's now a little light that goes on if your tires are underinflated. It was like, oh my God, we were like asking the industry to go to the moon or something to just have that. But how many people now look at that light and they say, oh my goodness, maybe I should go in and inflate a little bit more, right? But it's a warning, and it's saying, this could be dangerous for you. And just listening to what you're saying, it's almost like this should be a little card right there, right above the little light. You're saying, well, here's all the ways in which this technology does not, in fact, operate safely on the road, just so people can be seeing it on an ongoing basis. In other words, saying, well, yeah, you should know to inflate your tires. But we got the light there just to give people a little extra, warning. And I think that list that you just read is just something that can't be buried in the fine print. You can't be assuming that people know that it's dangerous for all those conditions. And so from my perspective, I just think that we've reached a point where we have to have higher standards for Tesla. We have to have higher standards for any company that's going to be moving towards autopilot, because there are a certain set of assumptions that we make about safety that don't necessarily transfer over. So I really do look forward to working with you, Madam Chair, on this and with all of my colleagues. And just one final question, if I could. I'd like to discuss the importance of ensuring that freight trains have two-person crews. Over and over, we've seen the safety benefits of multi-person crews. In fact, after the East Palestine derailment last year, this committee heard loud and clear that having multiple crew members on the train streamlined emergency response and increased crew and community safety. So, Madam Chair, do you agree that the inclusion of several crew members on the train that derailed in East Palestine enhanced safety?
Oh, in East Palestine, I have reviewed the transcript from the inward-facing camera, and it was clear they did a phenomenal job. There were three people in that locomotive. One was the locomotive engineer was focused on operating the train. The conductor at one point got out after it derailed to say, hey, what's going on here? Is something on fire? There was uncoupling of the locomotive so they can move forward and be safe, as they do in standard practice. And then another was talking with dispatch. So there was incredible crew resource management there.
Yeah, and has the NTSB investigated other rail accidents in which having multiple crew members on board was beneficial to the incident response?
There was one in Grettinger, Iowa. It was a Union Pacific derailment involving ethanol. It was a significant derailment and fire, and one crew member had uncoupled some of the cars right before the derailment and then pulled those cars away from the fire to ensure they were mitigating any damage and ensuring safety. The other crew member went around and pulled the other cars behind the derailment away from the other end. So they isolated just the cars that had derailed and the fire. So that took 2 crew members to do that.
No, excellent. So I think it's very clear that a 2-person crew is a matter of safety. Having that extra set of eyes, that extra set of hands, be able to deal with dangerous situations when they occur is absolutely essential. And that's why I'm so glad that the effort that Senator Vance and I have made to include that language in the Railway Safety Act, which the committee passed last year with the leadership of Chair Cantwell and Ranking Member Cruz, is so important because it mandates the 2-person crew. And I just think that's a common sense response to the obvious safety benefits that your agency has identified in having those people on board. So I just think we have to pass that legislation. It's very important. The 2-person crew provision is essential, and we're going to continue to try to work as hard as we can to enhance safety by keeping that provision in all the way to the President's desk. So we thank you so much for all of your work, and I feel like I'm all alone here and just go on indefinitely. You know?
I'm happy to talk about
I know
more
you are,
safety
and
issues.
it's great just to have somebody who is such an expert on all of these
you.
issues, but I thank you for your great work, and
Well, and thank you for your work on safety, and on behalf of the NTSB, you've been a real champion. Really, everyone has on this committee, and we really appreciate your support.
no, thank you so much. And with that, I would say, and I haven't done this in a long time,